Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Just gonna give another couple seconds for people to roll on in. It looks like more people are jumping on, which is very exciting. We are extremely excited to have this panel discussion here with Luminos Labs and Bloomreach. The topic for today is going to be around site search optimization and how it can improve your commerce ROI, which I think is going to be a very interesting topic to discuss. Definitely feel free to put any questions or comments in the messaging box so we can get to those at the end of the discussion. Um, I will move forward with some of the agenda items. I would like to first introduce some of our speakers, and then our speakers will kind of talk a little bit about each of our companies and how we kind of help with site search, and then we'll kind of jump right into some of the panel discussions that we have ready for you guys, and then follow it up with some Q&A. Awesome. So I wanted to quickly introduce our speakers. Jacoby, why don't you kind of take it off for us first?
Sure. Thanks, Phil. So, hi, everyone. Jacoby Zakreski, VP of Business Architecture here at Luminos Labs, which is essentially leading the practice of helping clients with what to do, with what technology, why it helps, and how we're going to approach utilizing it for business results. If you're not familiar, Luminos Labs is a systems integrator partnering with organizations like Bloomreach to help our clients navigate through the complexities of digital commerce. So we've been around for about 13 years and are certainly grateful to bring value to clients like Living Spaces, Chef's Warehouse, and Fjallraven as examples. Happy to be here.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jacoby. And Shanae, why don't you share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, awesome. Hi, everyone. Great to be here. My name is Shina Cho. I am a senior product marketing manager for Bloomreach Discovery. So we have a lot of different products under Bloomreach. We have a marketing automation tool that is powered by a customer data engine. We also offer product discovery solutions, which is sort of the main focus of the talk today, as well as the main sort of product suite that I'm in charge of, or I'm part of. We offer merchandising and search tooling, as well as a CMS. So we have been in the space for, 14 plus years. And yeah, we're just happy to be here and talk to you about how we could solve some problems for site search.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shanae. Awesome. All right. Well, let's kind of jump right into this topic of conversation. We do have our first question right here, which I think will be pretty interesting to kind of start us off. Jacoby, we'll actually start with you, and then you can kind of tee it off to
Mm.
Shanae. But first question is, what building blocks do you need in place to have a successful site search? And how do you know it's working?
Loaded question, Phil. Thanks.
Yes, yes, it is.
So, so not all search bars and experiences are created equal. And so you probably realize that if you've worked in this industry, and because it requires the right combination of technology, data, and really analytics. So I want you to think about websites or apps where search experience was not good and ask yourself why. Was it slow? Was it fast? Was it nice looking? Was it user friendly? Was it accurate? And then try to reverse engineer how they might have made that happen. Now, do the same thing for a bad search experience. Was it a non functional thing or really a functional thing that made it a good or bad experience? So, at the end of the day, what we view here is the tech enables, the data fuels, and then the analytics optimizes. So, in other words, from a visitor standpoint, we see the technology as interpreting the intent when you type in the search bar, the content describing the product, and then analytics is really for optimizing inside of your business. So those are the first part of the question, Phil. It's a good one, and I'm known for like showing some simple like building, like literally have kids building blocks. I have two kids, so I have these on my desk. Right or wrong, they're useful. And those are really the building blocks that I see here is the technology. Bloomreach, for example, you want it to be fast, you want it to be accurate, you want it to provide relevant search results, and it should be able to interpret things like synonyms, filter results, utilizing purposeful merchandising rules, and certainly integrating to other systems. And that's just like one piece of the puzzle here. But the number two building block, I would say, is probably the hardest part, and it's the data. So rich, accurate, descriptive product data is absolutely necessary. Now we're in the era of like generative AI at this point, and it does have a place here, but you do still need some of the legwork to get it to a good enough spot and then improve upon it. So you probably don't want generative AI approving itself across the board on your website. It's probably not a good call, especially if you do like safety data sheets as an example. But if we were to pick on product data, quality means some of the basics like titles, romance descriptions, attributes with integrity and standards to them, categorizing and tagging. And this is the case, in your business if you have 1,000 products or 10 million. Just know that the right technology can certainly handle like the non-functional things, but when it comes to good functional search experience, I think data quality is going to be a significant dependency on what good ROI looks like down the line. And we'll talk about that a little bit. Last piece that I'll mention is the analytics. Once you've set up a good tech platform, once you have data in what I'll call a palatable position, we're ready to start optimizing. But for a second, imagine you don't have good data and imagine you don't have good technology. I feel like the analytics might be driving you to the wrong place anyway. So we got to have those other two things in place. And so for organizations that are kind of looking at site experience and search, things like that, you certainly don't want to boil the ocean and really start small on the analytics side with things like what are your zero results types of searches, refinement usage, click-through rates, things like that. And then from there start tweaking. But at the end of the day, if we have our technology, our data, and our analytics in place, those are the building blocks. Shanae, we have those in place. How do we know they're actually working for our business after that, though?
Yeah, I love that. And I'm going to answer that question and also speak to kind of what a successful search solution might mean for different companies, because I think that also should be factored into the conversation. So usually customers will come to Bloomreach for one major goal across the board. They want to grow revenue. They want to grow online revenue. And whether that was a directive from your 3-year business plan to grow your digital channels by X%, whether maybe a company is facing fierce competition, post-COVID revenues are falling, which is happening, I would say, across the board as well. Customers are really looking for those site experience opportunities that are low lift but with a big impact, right? So then the question is revenue being left on the table because of that poor search experience? But then there's this sort of other impetus for customers coming to us, and that's they've gotten so many complaints about their bad search. There's a huge high bounce rate. Customers are caring enough to complain about it to the companies. Maybe C-level folks, CEOs are playing or tinkering around with your search bar and that they've broken it. That's actually a verbatim thing that we've heard from a prospect. All in all, there's a bad search experience happening on the site. Now, on the flip side, so a strong search experience means that your customers are really finding what they're looking for every single search, right? You're seeing these consistent conversion rates across your search experiences. And then also your team isn't spending their entire day managing a synonym library or creating dozens of rules that might end up conflicting and impacting the algorithm at the end of the day. You're also able to achieve your business goals, right? So let's say, hey, I have this huge inventory of XYZ product and I want to push that up to the top for relevant searches, and it's done. So that's what it looks like, in our opinion, to have a search experience that's working and a general product discovery experience that's working. But I want to chime in a little bit about tech here. So, what does successful search look like for your specific company? What we've seen in our 12 plus years talking with a lot of different customers and prospects is that there's definitely a wide spectrum of what I would call sort of digital maturity or digital readiness today. On the one end, if you don't even have, let's say, a transactional website today, so maybe no search bar, no cart, then there are definitely some fundamentals that need to be in place before you can really think about investing in, more high-tech functionality, right? And then a little ahead of that spectrum, we're seeing customers that have been using sort of these free or more affordable tools for product discovery and are looking for that upgrade. So maybe their e-commerce platform came with a search tool, but it's kind of unusable, or it's a legacy and you tinkered around with it and it didn't deliver value. Maybe it was a chore to manage. Maybe your team had to come up with hacks to get around it. Like we've seen all sorts of cases of this. So for companies in that sort of space, really any productized discovery solution would be, I would say, a level up. That being said, what to think about with that sort of scenario is what's the true cost of ownership? What's your TCO for a search tool? What resources and headcount do you have to manage your search and merchandising experience? Because really the answer to that should really narrow your focus in terms of your vendor selection. Because what we've seen is that there are tools out there that are still quite basic or whose algorithms don't account for commerce specific data. And then what ends up happening is that teams are then stuck managing the solution still on the back end and then creating lots of rules. So there's that. Okay, now we go kind of to the other end of the spectrum and we see these very mature and advanced leaders in e-commerce that are really looking for tooling that has both, enterprise scalability and strong core algorithms that are both like intelligent as well as flexible. So these types of commerce, we would say, are pretty sophisticated. They have teams that can tune and optimize for every category and query, and are really looking for a tech partnership that can help them scale. So that business impact will look different, right, for both ends of that spectrum. You're going to see probably a very large revenue lift with a lower baseline and then more incremental gains, I would say, for those larger companies. But the question at the end of the day for either type is, are you achieving what you set out to achieve with your commerce experience? Jacoby, so that's my sort of rundown of that. But maybe you've seen experiences from clients Luminos has worked with.
There's a lot that falls in line there, Shanae, with what we've seen as well. So we've worked with a number of organizations who are just adopting digital commerce like for the first time, particularly in large B2B companies, because they're non-digitally born, and that's fine. And then we have others who are considered like industry leaders in terms of digital maturity. So the whole spectrum is there, as you were mentioning. Now, those that are just adopting digital commerce for the first time, a typical requirement that you'll have on a 300 line items requirements list, as an example, is having a robust search and product discovery tool that can essentially read minds and predict the future, which is certainly asking a lot. And I appreciate the ambition, but I'm also a pragmatic Midwesterner who would probably own a minivan if given the chance. Okay. So on social media channels, on webinars like this, for example, on white papers, etc., we're exposed to XYZ company doing a certain thing to change their business. It's important to note those organizations are probably on a different level, Shanae, as like the ones that are super mature, right? And those are the ones we all see. It's a bell curve here for maturity, right? And it gets to the point where it almost seems unattainable for many organizations. But I'm here to say that it's, if you stick to the foundation levels of work, those building blocks we mentioned here in the original question, you roll up the sleeves, you stay consistent, good things will come to you. It's just like, Shanae, as you were mentioning, if you work out and lift weights for the first time, beginner gains are a thing. It's pretty easy to start increasing your weights on your squats, your deadlifts, your bench press when you're starting as a beginner. But at a certain point in time, there becomes diminishing returns and you hit a plateau. And that plateau, we might equate to business results. And that might be fine for your business, as an example. So that leads us to, once you've moved past those beginner gains, Shanae, just like you were mentioning, what do organizations do who are experienced and very digitally mature? Where do they go once they've hit that? First of all, good place to be. You didn't get there by accident. Second of all, the expectations of those beginner gains and those increases you were getting kind of have to go out the window. And you might need to expect incremental at this point. And you need to look at really what's worth doing and what's not worth doing. So look at macro trends, push further into richer content materials as an example, but don't forget about the non-functional things like reliability, speed, scalability. The last thing that I'll mention here is that those clients that we have, both Bloomreach and Luminos Labs, that are on that spectrum of being the industry leader, their commitment and diligence on those building blocks mentioned before is relentless. Like, they do not let up the gas pedal. And at the end of the day, you can't just buy good site search and have it show up on your doorstep and on your website within a day. It just doesn't happen. It's going to take honest effort, focus, and undoubtedly you'll come across a few speed bumps. So those building blocks are just that, building blocks. You kind of need to do the foundation and make sure it's not sand, that kind of thing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jacoby and Sinead, for that. Definitely is getting us kind of ramped up into the conversation. I think what will kind of steer this into next gear is this question right here. What typical challenges do companies face around site search? Sinead, I'd love to hear from you first. Your thoughts on this, especially coming from Bloomreach.
Yeah. So one of the things that I get to do at Bloomreach, which I love, is spending a lot of time listening to customers, both prospective and current. So obviously, as a tech vendor, we get to see how our unique solution can solve customer pains and challenges. And over the course of our work, we've definitely identified some very clear patterns. And I'll talk through those as kind of like what we would see as the main challenges. The first one is limitations in tooling. So at a high level, one of the main business issues that prospects come to us to help fix is a lack of employee efficiency or team efficiency. So not only, like I mentioned before, their top business goal is to increase revenue, but they're facing limited resources to do so, right? A lot of the legacy tools, for example, that came with their e-commerce platform behave more like a framework for search or are super, what I would say, DIY, and are not productized in a way that works for business users, search owners, or merchandising teams. Most e-commerce teams today are looking to scale their work, right? Maximize efficiencies due to rising labor costs. There are so many reasons to do that. Not onboard a site solution that requires more headcount to manage. And that's definitely true across company size. We're seeing enterprise companies as well as growth or mid-market companies saying the same thing. They want to fix a lack of team efficiency or employee efficiency. Not every enterprise e-commerce company has a team of developers, right, to make search work. The second thing is really a lack of analytics and application. So maybe it's not that they don't have even a tool to get search working, but they don't understand how or where to start. And that's what we would call, again, those like sort of DIY in disguise tools. It's a lot of backtracking your history of changes and trying to see what went wrong and when. The thing is, your search product owners and e-commerce merchandising teams, they want to know what is happening on their site, right? They own that site experience from end to end, and their job every day is to make their products shown to the right customer at the right time. So visibility really into search and merchandising performance, it's kind of baseline stuff at this point. In our era today, we're capturing data more than ever, and we're able to track the impact of like those little optimizations like at scale. So then being able to now present that data back to the user and then make it super clear, make it super actionable, that's huge. It's game changing for teams. Merchandisers tend to love us for that very reason, because they're saying they can actually use the data to then inform their decision making for the day. And then finally, I would say sort of that other challenge that teams face today would be a lack of functional AI. So not going down a rabbit hole of all the latest and greatest in AI advancements. Bloomreach has been in this space for a while now. And actually, I'm going to plug here. We just hosted an amazing summit last week on the future of AI in commerce. It's called the Edge Summit. Okay, end of the plug. But here's what we're hearing from customers in the discovery space. So it's super easy for a tech vendor to say that they have advanced AI, data-driven AI, utilizing the latest sort of XYZ machine learning techniques. But really, customers are looking for proof in the pudding. They want to see how that machine learning technique is going to drive measurable impact for the business. Is it functional? They want to understand it, right? They want to use it to diagnose or see how ranking is impacted for a query. One prospect said, everyone says the same thing. Everyone has the same AI. As a tech vendor, I believe all other tech vendors would say that's not true. We have the best, but it's a super fair statement, right? And as someone who is really trying to understand the customer's worldview, that needs to be taken seriously. So making sense of that underlying intelligence that powers your search, and then being able to take action on it, adjust it, etc. I think that's something more and more the market is going to want to see with their product discovery solutions. Jacoby, what do you think about that?
I think Phil needs to ask easier questions. But I'm gonna echo your sentiments there with the tooling first and foremost. Having been a technology leader at a large distributor and starting my early years in like the help desk, I am very empathetic towards the tools teams and peers have to use for their tasks. Okay, and so with that being said, I fully believe that team members who enjoy using the tools they work with day in and day out will have a positive downstream effect, at least in this case, with external customer experiences. Okay. So if I need a developer, by the way, for every small change as a business user, then something's probably wrong. And I'm saying that as a systems integrator. I'd love to teach you to fish rather than have to fish for you every single time and feeling like we're holding something hostage, right? We call that technology enablement. So the tool should enable a business user to do their day in and day out stuff. Now, when the business wants to change gears completely and do something brand new, by all means, right? Developers, things like that. And so I'll bucket the challenges probably in three buckets here. Um, People, process, and technology. And at the end of the day, we're oriented as a systems integrator towards the tech side here. But technology does have an interesting way of exposing like what I'll call organization awards, particularly site search. Okay. So I'll give an example of a common challenge in each one of those buckets between people, process, technology. First of all, people. Um, Common challenge we see in many clients and organizations is just internal experience. You know, sometimes site search, the program management around it, whether you have one person or 10 people, maybe just the intern, they have to manage site search, right? So just internal experience kind of a thing. And boy, you cut your teeth and you get a lot of stuff on the resume, which is great. But sometimes that doesn't equate to business results. Secondarily, I think it's a big one here is just dissonant collaboration between groups like marketing, merchandising, engineering, digital, and supplier management. So site search is like a culmination of all those teams working together. And when it's not working well beyond the technology, you can kind of see where collaboration is happening or not happening. So people is a big part of this. Secondarily is process. Again, we work with a lot of non-digitally born companies. And so we see this happening with a fragmented customer experience. For example, in B2B, there's a thing called customer part numbers, which you have your own unique part numbers per customer kind of a thing, because it's, you know, their version of it. If your team has customer part numbers stored in the ERP, but not in the e-commerce system or vice versa, that's a funky user experience, right? I should be able to go into a branch facility and say, hey, I'm ordering XYZ123. And that counter person should probably know what that is. They should be able to search and know what that is, whether on the website or in the ERP system. So, you know, this is particularly true again in non-digitally born companies who have ingrained processes, right or wrong, but also have to contend with like a fast-moving digital market. So it's kind of where worlds start colliding. And then the last piece, technology, something we experience a lot with search is indexing. Indexing can be a huge challenge for organizations who have a lot of data, as you mentioned. And whether it's scalability, performance, or distributed data across different ERP systems, CRMs, PIMs, things like that, search ends up being towards the end of that like data lineage process. And if we're trying to tackle solutions at the end of that lineage process, we may end up creating business logic and things like that in systems where other teams are not involved. And now we've created dissonance again, right? And the last thing I'll mention on technology is you can always throw like more horsepower at the indexing problem, but at a certain point in time, fundamentally, it might end up being like an application architecture hamstringing you, right? So that's something to also keep an eye out, particularly if you're looking to replatform to a new site search technology, things like that, the scalability and resiliency. So if any of those things sound familiar, you know, to you, just there's solace in knowing you're not alone. But once you've knocked down those basic building blocks, these are good challenges to have, but you might find yourself in a scenario of choosing what not to do and optimizing the things that matter. So this is where ROI really starts to kick in. And so, Shanae, I'm going to toss the ball back to you here. And what would be your perspective on how we might, what I'll call execute optimization in a practical sense?
Yeah, and I love that. We've been really talking about site search optimization on a more sort of high level, because it's true, right? Embarking on a site search project, it's truly a larger sort of behemoth thing that will need, strong leadership, resources, and time to really kick off well. But we know, and I'm sure you all know, which is why you're probably part of this webinar, is that it's a worthy investment, right? Um, Optimizing search can be one of the most impactful projects for e-commerce teams to improve conversions and revenue per visit. If a customer is searching on your site today, they're much further down the funnel than a customer who is just browsing. We've seen in our data, searchers account for maybe 15% on average of visitors, but 45% in revenue because searchers are converting 3x better than browsers. So that's huge. That's very impactful. So I feel like today so far we've talked about the building blocks. We talked about how to know if site search is working, and then those common challenges and all of the things that Jacoba you mentioned about that businesses should really consider and think hard about before starting a project like this. So what should teams do next, right? So when we talk about site search optimization, what are some practical things that teams should consider? So here at Bloomreach Discovery, we've conducted 100 plus formal A/B tests through the years, and we've driven on average out of those tests 11% revenue uplift from search, and then 4% revenue uplift on category pages. And that doesn't include what we've calculated to be about 30 to 50% hours on average that we're helping teams save through our user-friendly merchandising solution. So Jacoby will talk more about like saving time as a KPI, which I love that for search optimization. But how are we able to accomplish this? So I wanted to touch on a few basic optimizations that a site search solution, whether Bloomreach or others, should really be able to solve for on that path to ROI. So the first thing that really comes up, and you talked about as well, zero search results, right? Or null search results, tackling that, right? So let me give you an example here. If you're a fashion house and you only sell Gucci products, but then someone searches on your site for a specific Prada jacket or style, maybe it's blowing up on TikTok, a very specific Prada style. Make sure that when someone searches for that Prada jacket, that you're still showing Gucci jackets and then you're not giving them nothing, right? So there's two parts to this possible scenario. One, does your search engine understand queries semantically? Was it able to parse that jacket was the product type in question and that Prada was a brand attribute? Secondly, how do you manage your synonym library today? That's my second question to that. Does your search provider sort of already have a vast commerce specific data set that could help you automatically correct for misspellings and deliver relevant synonyms? Semantic understanding also helps with long tail search queries. So if you're a home goods retailer and someone searches for, faux plants in white ceramic vase, make sure you're delivering plants in a vase, not just plants, and then not just vases, which I believe a lot of search engines would actually surface. And that is, again, another example of semantic understanding done right, being able to recognize the actual product type of a search query and then filtering results by key features. So there's all of that. And then let's talk about unique to you queries. And I say unique to you because search is used very differently across industries, right? If you're a B2B distributor and your customers usually use your search bar to search part numbers or manufacturing series numbers, and you mentioned that before, Jacoby, all of which are a series of numbers and letters. My question to you is, does search work for you at all? We've come across a lot of B2B customers that don't have a workable search experience for situations just like this. Those out-of-the-box search engines won't be able to solve for this right out of the box. My question for there is, does your search engine understand part numbers? Can they clean up queries using letters and numbers and then use tokenizers to reduce zero search results? This would be a huge impactful capability for B2B. Thirdly, how about tackling boosting of certain products in search results? So here's another optimization that can be super impactful on your bottom line. Are there products you'd like to see boosted? So maybe they're high margin, maybe it's a seasonal thing, maybe there's a surplus inventory. Maybe you need a certain product and brand locked for category pages, perhaps as part of a contractual obligation with that brand, right? Now, all of these are possible search optimizations that drive measurable revenue impact. Can your search solution today deliver on these requirements? And then finally, one of my favorites is really tackling personalization in search. Personalization is such a widespread buzzword in the industry, but true personalization has so many possible use cases with product discovery. And we're seeing actually incredible conversion lift through personalization opportunities in product discovery. So one example that I love, say you're a grocer and a customer is searching for strawberries. And they're searching based on zip code because they're based maybe like north of Lake Tahoe, something like that, or Beverly Hills, something like that, right? We were able to surface that purchasing patterns based on zip code would actually narrow down the types of products that a customer would actually end up purchasing. So what we did was we utilized that data to drive organic grocery items to searches using that specific group zip code based on the data that we were able to collect. So a shopper who is based out of a zip code, let's say, Beverly Hills, they wanted to buy organic strawberries. They weren't even looking at the regular strawberries. So what we were doing that for that segment at large, we were able to then always surface organic strawberries for those shoppers in that specific zip code. What we saw, the company, what they saw was huge increases in AOV, average order value, and add to basket rates. So simple optimizations like that are utilizing essentially personalization or segment personalization, that's what we would call it here, are able to really grow dividends there. So, I'm not going to go into much more than that because there are really countless other optimization opportunities. But I will just drop a use case library that our team at Bloomreach has created, and I'll put that in the chat for all of you to have it just to review. Bill?
Thanks, Shanae. No, that's definitely impactful, and thank you, Jacoby, as well, for kind of sharing your insights on the challenges. I know it's never easy to talk about what challenges are out there, but how can we actually resolve those challenges? And I think what the third question of this panel we really want to kind of focus on is, how can an agency and a tech vendor work together for the benefit of the client, and how can they help overcome these challenges? With having an agency and a tech vendor here right now, Shanae, I love for you to kind of maybe start us off with this question, and then Jacoby, you can definitely follow up on it as well.
Yeah, I actually really loved this webinar, getting to know Jacoby and talking to him, and I double clicking on basically everything Jacoby said, but about the building blocks to a strong site search experience, and really that importance of like process and people, right? I absolutely think that agencies bring that value for clients with their wealth of experience in managing implementations, helping resolve problems at scale, that give them this unique perspective, I would say, that maybe a tech vendor, which they're built to solve specific problems, can only do so much within their sort of scope or what they know about a company. Now, recommending certain tech solutions based on a really detailed profile fit of a customer is something I think is pretty special about working with an agency. They really know the ins and the outs of your internal processes, resources, capabilities, and then to help you ultimately succeed in achieving whatever goal you've set out. Now, from a software perspective, we know the expectations that customers also have. They're embarking on this project because they want to see, improvements. They want it, whether that's ROI, whether that's, efficiencies with their team, productivity, or time savings. For us as a software vendor, we want to offer ourselves as that easy win for clients that deliver on those specific business goals to make the client happy, but also the agency happy. And I say easy, but I know it absolutely takes clear goal definition, hard work, knowledge of tech gaps, putting the right people and processes in place to make that project successful. So at the end of the day, in my view of what's the benefit for customers is that an agency and tech vendor partnership is ultimately reducing risk for clients and help them solve problems faster and more efficiently. Jacoby, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I'm not going to go, into the rabbit hole of how to solve those specific examples I gave. We're going to need like a few hours and maybe a therapy session or two for those. But just know that those things do impact your overall ROI. And at the end of the day, the agency and software company should prioritize helping over selling, though. Right. That's the goal here from a business goal strategic perspective. Now, a fiduciary responsible part of the organization will always evaluate tech spend, especially like if we're in budgeting time right now. and ask itself if it's worth keeping OpEx and CapEx types of stuff. So knowing the building blocks and challenges we've talked about, there's certainly a tech component to all of this, where if there's a functionality or scalability issue with the platform, that's fair. Okay. But if you're considering moving to a new technology or platform, I do think it's important to figure out why the existing one isn't working. And oftentimes, that's people or process oriented over technology. So let's paint a quote unquote hypothetical picture, and you're going through budget planning for 2024 right now. And there's a whole list of OpEx and CapEx things. And somehow the topic gets on this six-figure piece of software that the CFO is just eyeballing, right? Like that's a juicy one we need to reduce somehow. Somebody somewhere goes, hey, I saw something that can replace that for 10% of the current cost. Suddenly the snowball starts, right? And then stats of a 400% ROI in 3 months are thrown in a presentation and consider the contract signed. And that's like a cautionary flag of when things move that way. So now I want to fast forward. And how often has a platform, technology, etc., been replaced only to result in the same issues you were experiencing before, right? And so it's a tough pill to swallow, but that's where the business, an experienced integrator or agency, and the technology vendor really have to work together towards identifying problems beyond surface level, pain points, and into root cause identification. And that's where that trifecta of collaboration comes in here on the question. So secondarily, or, for bullet point 14 here, Shanae, you mentioned agencies and integrators having different perspective on things, and I do agree. And mentioned earlier in the conversation, I believe I brought up data lineage and how search is towards the end of that tail. And we want to focus on solving the problems upstream where possible. And we don't want to be reinventing the wheel. So when someone says, hey, my site search is terrible, usually my first question is, tell me why. Tell me why that's terrible. And then they'll go, oh, bad product data. Well, why is there bad product data? Is there enough people helping with it, enough hands on it? Do you have a PIM? Things like that. Eventually, you'll find yourself in a position a lot of times with site search, maybe the technology platform isn't the core problem. It's something that is feeding into it that's the core problem. And so we work heavily here at Luminos in the integration space. So we're used to working with other systems of record, CRMs, ERPs, WMSs, PLMs, things like that. And we need to look beyond the search platform and into what's feeding it first and foremost. So it's pretty common, for example, for us to work with a multi-brand organization that's run off of like 8 different ERPs, and then has this aspiration to have like a commerce center of excellence where it's one operational team managing the digital commerce center of excellence for all 8 brands, which is great. It's kind of like a shared service, right? And it's a tall ask to tell that client or prospect, hey, you're going to need to consolidate all 8 of those ERPs before we do this. Like, that's not a good business model for us anyways. So we need to be like, you know what? These are the ingredients we have to work with, and we need to make it happen for the client. And so making that happen is exactly what we do. And it's not easy, and it's because it involves people, processes, technology. And the last thing I'll mention is that if you can't tell, measuring like true ROI is really hard here. And it's one thing to look at metrics like AOV, conversion rate, revenue per search, etc. We got to be doing those things. But I see that taking more hold after a certain level of maturity is already established. So, Shanae, you mentioned those mature organizations in the optimization stage. I feel like ROI starts to really take hold there of incremental things. So if you're listening to this webinar and you're being asked to come up with an ROI for moving to a new technology or keeping an existing technology, I would give the following advice. Be able to tell a good story with the data you do have, first and foremost, right? But I also want to consider operational metrics that go beyond direct revenue and costs, that focus on things productivity, speed of operations, and capacity. I always include intangible benefits like improved brand perception, customer goodwill, and employee retention. Shanae, you and I both mentioned kind of quality of life for tooling. I do think that's a big one. Every 5 minutes saved, you look at the average wage per person, it starts to add up a lot into the ROI. And then lastly, take a look at the opportunity cost here. What is lost by maintaining the status quo versus the unknowns of investing in change? So pretend we keep doing what we're doing. What's the opportunity cost here? What are we leaving on the table? And you don't really have to go it alone to the question here. If you're in those positions as an organization, the tech vendor and agency can and will help you through those conversations. You certainly don't need to do this kind of in an echo chamber and off on your own. So
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jacoby and Shanae, for kind of the insights and overviews of, kind of enhancing your site search and how the capabilities of that to actually do it. Easier said than done, but you definitely painted a good picture for us nonetheless. Um, it looks like we don't have any questions from the audience at this time. I'm assuming you guys just did an amazing job in kind of explaining everything. I will wrap us up here, stating that we will be recording. This has been recorded, and we will be sharing this out to the audience. So please keep a lookout for the recording, so you guys could have it, review it as you may. If you have any questions for Luminos Labs or Bloomreach, feel free to reach out to us as well. We're always happy to do a demo or answer any questions that you maybe have just around site search or any other of your capabilities. So feel free. We are always here at your disposal. Lastly, thank you, audience, for attending. Thank you, Jacoby and Shanae, for speaking and sharing your insights. And we greatly look forward to doing this again shortly. Awesome.
thanks, Phil.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
Sinead.
Have a good one. Bye,
Thanks.
everyone.
See y'all. Bye.